Welcome to the captivating realm of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any of our exciting new stories. Enjoy the journey.
Edward Paul wiped the grease off his hands, the rag leaving dark smears on his calloused skin. The setting sun cast an amber glow across his small workshop, glinting off the chrome of half-dismantled engines. Checking the clock, he saw it was 6:30 p.m. Another day done. Locking up, he stepped out into the quiet streets of Millbrook, Iowa. The same roads he'd walked countless times, flanked by the same familiar houses and faces. He nodded to Mrs. Henderson, who was watering her prized petunias, so absorbed in his routine that it felt automatic. His apartment was above Gus's hardware, up a staircase that creaked under his weight. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of motor oil clinging to his clothes and the faint aroma of leftover pizza. Glancing at the calendar hanging askew on the wall, he noticed the date, July 15th, 2024, another day that blended seamlessly into all the others. He showered quickly, trading his grease-stained coveralls for a plain t-shirt and jeans. Drying his hair, he noticed a flyer on the fridge. Annual Millbrook Flea Market, tonight. Why not? He muttered, grabbing his keys. Maybe he'd find some old car parts to mess around with. The town square was buzzing, a lively contrast to its usual calm. Tables were piled high with second-hand goods and knickknacks. Edward wandered through the rows, trailing his fingers over dusty book spines and tarnished silverware. Find anything you like, son? A gravelly voice made him turn. An elderly man with a long white beard smiled at him. Just looking, Edward replied, giving a shrug. The old man's eyes sparkled. Maybe you haven't found the right thing yet. He reached under his table and brought out a bottle that shimmered as it caught the light. Edward's breath hitched. The bottle glowed with a spectrum of colors that seemed to shift and move, as though it were alive. Strange symbols etched into its surface were unlike anything he'd ever seen. What's this? Edward asked, transfixed. Just an old trinket, the old man replied with a chuckle. But she's been waiting for you, I think. Waiting for me? What do you mean? Some things choose their owners, he said, holding out the bottle. $20 if you want it. Edward hesitated, his practical side warring with an unusual urge to take it. I'm not sure. Trust me, the man winked. You won't regret it. Before he knew it, Edward was handing over a crumpled $20 bill. The bottle was unexpectedly warm in his hands. Enjoy, the old man said with a mysterious smile. But when Edward looked up to ask something more, the man and his stall were gone. A little disoriented, Edward checked his hand. The bottle was still there, pulsing with an unearthly light. As he walked home, the bottle was a comforting weight in his pocket. Back at his apartment, he set it on the kitchen counter. Under the fluorescent lights, the colors swirled even more vividly. He traced a finger over the strange symbols, which seemed more like constellations than letters. As he touched one intricate design, a spark jolted his fingertip. Ouch! He jerked his hand back and the bottle wobbled. Lunging forward to steady it, his hand closed around the glass. The lid popped off with a loud pop, and a blinding light filled the room. Shielding his eyes, he took a step back. As the glow faded, he lowered his arm and blinked, trying to clear his vision. Hovering above the floor was a figure. A woman, but not quite. Her skin glowed with an electric blue light, as though stars danced just beneath it. White hair floated around her face, defying gravity, and her eyes were like swirling galaxies. Edward's mouth opened, but no words came out. The figure tilted her head, studying him. When she spoke, her voice resonated, sending a shiver down his spine. I am Jenna, she said, her lips slightly out of sync with her words. You have awoken me, mortal. By ancient law, I am bound to grant you 3 wishes. Edward backed up, hitting the refrigerator. A few takeout menus and bills slid to the floor. What? Jenna raised an eyebrow. Did I use the wrong language? My translation matrix may need adjustment. She waved a hand, and suddenly he felt a tingling in his ears. Is this better? Her words now matched her mouth movements perfectly. Yeah, but who are you? What are you? A hint of a smile crossed her face. I am a quantum djinn, a being of energy and possibility. You might call me a genie, though the term is lacking. Edward's mind raced. Genies aren't real. This isn't happening. She raised an eyebrow again. And yet, here I am. Your disbelief, though understandable, doesn't erase my existence. Edward ran a hand through his hair, pacing. Okay, let's say you are real. You mentioned wishes? She nodded. 3 wishes. It is the cosmic bargain, freedom in exchange for wish fulfillment. Ideas filled his mind. Endless wealth, superpowers, fixing any machine with a touch. But his small town practicality held him back. There had to be a catch. What's the fine print? He asked, crossing his arms. Stories like this always have strings attached. She smiled slightly. You're perceptive. There are indeed limitations. I can't bring back the dead, force love, or directly cause harm. Beyond that, the possibilities are vast, though wishes often come with twists. Edward nodded, taking it all in. And what happens after the 3 wishes? You just disappear? A flicker of sadness crossed her face. I returned to my bottle, awaiting the next summoner. It's how things work. The thought of putting her back in that tiny bottle didn't sit right with him. That sounds terrible. Isn't there a way to free you? Jenna's eyes widened. You'd consider that? Most mortals think only of their own desires. Edward shrugged. It just doesn't seem fair to keep you stuck granting wishes forever. She studied him with a look of newfound interest. You're different, Edward Paul. Wait, how do you know my name? Her lips curved slightly. I know many things about you. It's part of the bond between a djinn and their summoner. Edward felt himself blush. That's kinda unsettling. I apologize if I've made you uncomfortable. Perhaps we could talk? It's been ages since I've had a real conversation. Edward hesitated, then nodded. Sure, why not? It's not like I had big plans for Friday night. He gestured to the small kitchen table. Can you sit? Jenna gracefully. Edward lowered himself into a chair, feeling how surreal the whole moment was. He took a deep breath and started hesitantly. So, what's it like being a quantum djinn? Jenna's eyes glimmered, tiny constellations swirling within. It's hard to explain in terms your 3-dimensional mind can grasp. I exist across multiple planes of reality, my essence interwoven with the cosmos itself. Edward blinked. Maybe we could start simpler. How long have you been doing this genie thing? Jenna's brow furrowed slightly. Time flows differently for me, but in your sense of time, it would be millions of Earth years. Edward let out a low whistle. That's a long time. You must have granted some pretty wild wishes. A hint of a smile curved Jenna's lips. Indeed, mortals are endlessly imaginative with their wishes, though often a bit short-sighted in what they ask for. Got a favorite? Edward asked. Leaning forward in genuine curiosity, Jenna's gaze drifted as she seemed to recall a memory. There was a young pharaoh who wished for a monument to last for eternity. I may have been enthusiastic with that one. Edward's eyes widened. Wait, are you saying you built the pyramids? Jenna winked, a surprisingly charming gesture for her otherworldly form. Let's just say I contributed. Edward shook his head, still processing it. Wow! And here I am just trying to keep old Chevys running. Jenna tilted her head, studying him. You're a creator, in your way. I see in your mind images of machines brought back to life by your hands. Edward felt a spark of pride. I wouldn't say creator. I just fix things, make them work when others have given up. A noble pursuit, Jenna replied with warmth. To extend usefulness, to preserve function, these are no small matters. Edward rubbed his neck, a little embarrassed. Thanks, I guess. But it's not exactly exciting. Same cars, same problems. Jenna leaned in, her eyes probing. Is that why you hesitate to make a wish? Do you seek something more, something beyond the monotony? Edward hesitated, but he couldn't deny it. Maybe, but I don't think a wish is the answer. Seems risky for something that doesn't last. Jenna nodded. Many have wasted their wishes on fleeting pleasures. You show wisdom in restraint. Edward tapped his fingers on the table, thinking. So if granting wishes can be so tricky, why do it at all? Jenna's gaze softened. It's complicated. A pact binds my kind, a cosmic bargain that compels us to channel creation's raw energy and shape it according to mortal will. But such power can be intoxicating, and some of my kin have been corrupted by it, delighting in the chaos of twisted wishes. Edward frowned. That sounds awful. Is there no way to break the pact? Jenna's eyes widened, genuinely surprised. You would consider that? Most mortals only seek to exploit our power, not to free us from it. Edward shrugged. It just doesn't feel right to be forced to grant wishes forever. Everyone should have a choice. Jenna studied him with a look he couldn't quite decipher. You're different, Edward Paul. Your compassion, it's rare. Edward felt himself blush. I'm just a guy who likes fixing things. When I see something broken, I want to make it right. Jenna's lips curled into a faint smile. So you see my situation as something to fix? Edward scratched his head, a bit embarrassed. I mean, if there was a way, sure. But I figure it's not that simple. Jenna's gaze turned thoughtful. There is one way, though it's rare and complicated. Edward leaned in, intrigued. What is it? Jenna hesitated. If a djinn were to bond in marriage to a mortal, the nature of wish granting would change. The spouse would have access to unlimited wishes, but the djinn would be freed from their usual constraints. Edward's eyes went wide. Marriage, as an actual marriage? Jenna nodded slowly. Yes, a union of essences, a blending of mortal and cosmic energies. It has only happened a few times in history. Edward's thoughts spun as he tried to process the idea. And what happens to the djinn? Do they become human? Jenna shook her head. Not exactly. We retain our powers, but they become tethered to the mortal spouse. It's a profound connection, deeper than typical human relationships. Edward shot to his feet, pacing. That's a lot to take in. I mean, we just met and you're talking about some kind of cosmic marriage? Jenna watched him, a hint of amusement in her gaze. I only explained the possibility, Edward Paul. I did not suggest we pursue it. Edward's face flushed. Right. I didn't mean to assume. I mean, you're amazing, but... He trailed off, mortified. Jenna laughed, the sound like stardust in the air. Your honesty is refreshing, Edward. Most mortals would already be scheming to exploit the loophole. Edward sank back into his chair. Guess I'm not most mortals. The idea of trapping you in a marriage just for wishes feels wrong. Jenna's expression softened. And that, Edward Paul, is why you are worthy of the power you now hold. Your compassion is rare. Edward looked into her eyes, feeling the depth of emotion in her gaze. So, what happens now? I still have 3 wishes, right? Jenna nodded. Yes, the choice remains yours. Edward took a deep breath. I think I need some time. This is a lot to take in. Jenna inclined her head. A wise decision. Rushed wishes often lead to regret. Just then, a clock chimed in the living room. Edward glanced at it, surprised. It's already midnight? Jenna's form began to shimmer faintly. The witching hour is here. I must return to my vessel. Edward felt a pang of disappointment. Do you have to? Can't you stay out? Jenna shook her head, a glimmer of sadness in her eyes. Without an active wish or other arrangements, I am bound by cosmic law. Edward nodded toward the bottle, trying to hide his disappointment. I understand. Will I see you again? Jenna asked, her smile lighting up her entire face. You just have to open the bottle, Edward Paul. I'll always be here when you call, she said, her form beginning to fade into mist. Edward's heart raced in panic. There was so much more he wanted to ask, so much more he wanted to learn. Without thinking, he blurted out, Wait, I want you to be my wife. The words hung in the air, charged with possibility. Jenna's eyes widened in surprise, and her form solidified again. Edward, do you know what you're asking? She said, her voice filled with uncertainty. Edward's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't meant to say it. The thought wasn't even fully formed. But now that it was out, he said, I think I do. It means you'd be free, right? And we'd be connected in some way? Jenna's face became unreadable. It's far more complicated than that, Edward Paul. A bond deeper than anything your kind normally experiences. Are you sure this is what you want? Edward's words hung in the air, full of tension. Jenna's cosmic eyes studied his face, searching for any sign of dishonesty or hidden agenda. When she found nothing, she exhaled slowly, the sound like distant starlight. Very well, Edward Paul, she said, her voice a mix of awe and hesitation. By the power granted to me by the cosmic laws, I accept your proposal. We are now bound in marriage, for better or for worse, across all dimensions and timelines. A glowing thread of energy appeared between them, connecting Edward's chest to Jenna's. It pulsed with otherworldly light before vanishing, leaving a warm sensation in its wake. Edward blinked in disbelief. That's it? We're married? Jenna's lips curved into a playful smile. Did you expect a grand ceremony? I assure you, this bond is far more significant than any earthly union. Right, Edward muttered, running a hand through his hair. So, what happens now? Jenna shimmered, her form becoming more human-like. Her skin retained a faint blue glow, but lacked the celestial fire it once had. Now, Edward Paul, we navigate this new reality together. You freed me from my bottle, but bound me to you in the process. It's an adjustment. The days that followed were full of discovery and change. Edward woke up each day, half expecting it to all be a dream. But there Jenna was, sitting on his old sofa, reading about human customs and technology. "I don't understand the appeal of this reality TV," Jenna commented one evening, furrowing her brow as she watched a group of glamorous women argue on screen. "Is conflict really so entertaining for your kind?" Edward chuckled and sat down next to her with a bowl of popcorn. "It's not exactly high art, but sometimes it's fun to watch other people's drama instead of dealing with your own." Jenna tilted her head, thinking, "That's an interesting coping mechanism, though I find your life far more interesting than these fake scenarios." Edward blushed. Even after all this time with her, Jenna's blunt observations still caught him off guard. "Well, my life's definitely gotten a lot more interesting lately." Jenna smiled faintly. "I'll admit, I didn't expect human life to be this complex. Your world is both mundane and fascinating, more than I ever imagined." As the days went by, Edward found himself falling into a surprising domestic routine with his otherworldly wife. He taught Jenna how to cook, marveling at her ability to perfectly replicate recipes after just one look. In return, she told him stories about distant galaxies and civilizations long gone. "You're telling me you were there when they built Stonehenge?" Edward asked, astonished one night while they cooked. Jenna nodded, chopping vegetables with ease. "Yes, although I must tell you, it was far less mystical than your historians believe. It was mainly a meeting place for interstellar traders." Edward shook his head, grinning. "A month ago, I would have thought you were crazy. Now, now I'm not sure anything can surprise me." Jenna's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Is that a challenge, Edward Paul?" Before he could reply, she waved her hand, and the kitchen transformed. The walls melted away to reveal an alien landscape, purple grass swaying under twin moons, and bizarre creatures flying through a green sky. Edward gasped, almost dropping the pan he was holding. "Holy language, dear husband," Jenna teased, returning the kitchen to its normal state with another gesture. "Wouldn't want to shock your quaint Midwestern sensibilities." As the weeks passed, Edward found himself more and more drawn to Jenna. Her childlike wonder at human experiences was endearing, but it was her ancient wisdom and sharp wit that really captivated him. He began looking forward to their evening talks, discussing everything from philosophy to quantum physics. One warm night, Edward suggested they climb to the roof of his building. Jenna's eyes lit up with excitement, and soon they were lying on a blanket, staring up at the stars. "It's beautiful," Edward whispered, his gaze fixed on the twinkling sky. "But I bet it's nothing compared to what you've seen out there." Jenna paused for a moment, deep in thought. "Beauty is subjective, Edward. I've seen stars born and die, watched galaxies collide in cosmic dances. But there's a unique charm to seeing the universe from this perspective, small, yet full of wonder." Edward turned to look at her, mesmerized by the starlight reflecting off her ethereal features. "Do you miss it? Being out there?" Jenna met his gaze, her eyes swirling with emotions he couldn't read. "I'm not sure. My previous existence was vast but often lonely. This new life, bound to Earth and to you, feels more limited, yet somehow fuller." Edward's heart skipped a beat at her words. He hesitated, then reached out and took her hand. As their fingers intertwined, a current of energy passed between them. "Jenna," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I know this whole situation is crazy. We barely know each other, and I'm just a small-town mechanic, but I think I'm falling in love with you." Jenna's eyes widened, and for a moment, it seemed like shooting stars were dancing within them. "Edward Paul," she whispered, "I've lived for eons, observed countless lives and loves, yet I find myself feeling emotions I cannot fully understand. Is this what you call love?" Edward nodded, unable to find the right words. Jenna leaned in, her lips brushing his in a kiss that sent electric waves through his whole body. For that brief moment, Edward felt as if he could see the entire universe, countless realities stretching out before him. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "Wow," Edward murmured, his mind racing. "That was definitely something," Jenna agreed, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Seems like we still have much to discover, both of us." On the blanket, with their hands still intertwined, Edward felt a sense of contentment he had never experienced before. The once stifling rhythms of small-town life now seemed peaceful, made all the richer by Jenna's presence. but their idyllic world was about to shatter. The following morning, Edward woke to the sound of commotion outside. He stumbled toward the window, with Jenna right behind him. A black van was parked across the street, and men in dark suits were questioning his neighbors. "Oh no," Jenna breathed, her form shimmering with agitation. "They found us." Edward furrowed his brow. "Who? What's going on?" Jenna's expression darkened. "Your government has detected my energy signature. I had hoped that our marriage would mask it, but I underestimated their technology." Edward's mind raced. "But they don't know about you specifically, right? We could just say it was some weird power or something." Jenna shook her head. "It's not that simple. My presence here violates multiple interstellar treaties. If they discover what I am..." She trailed off, her eyes filled with fear. Edward clenched his jaw, determination flooding him. "Then we won't let them find out. You're my wife now, Jenna. I swear I'll protect you." Jenna's eyes glistened with emotion. "Ed, you don't understand. The forces we're up against are not just human. There are cosmic entities who will come for me and enforce the old laws." Edward took her hands in his, meeting her gaze with unwavering resolve. "I don't care if we have to face the entire universe. I'm not letting anyone take you away." A knock at the door startled them both. "Mr. Paul?" came a stern voice. "This is Agent Carter with the Department of Energy. We need to ask you a few questions about some unusual energy readings in the area." Edward and Jenna exchanged a panicked look. Time was running out. "Just a minute," Edward called, his mind racing. Turning to Jenna, he whispered urgently, "Can you make yourself invisible or something?" Jenna shook her head. "Not without expending energy. They'd definitely detect me." Edward thought for a moment. "Maybe it's best if I..." "No," he interrupted firmly. "We're in this together. Just follow my lead, okay?" Jenna nodded, her form shimmering slightly as she adjusted her appearance to look more conventionally human. The ethereal glow of her skin faded, and her hair changed to a more earthly shade of blonde. Edward took a deep breath and opened the door. Two men in sharp suits stood in the hallway, their faces expressionless. "Mr. Paul," the taller of the two said, "I'm Agent Carter, and this is my colleague, Agent Thompson. May we come in?" Edward forced a smile and stepped aside. "Of course. What's this about?" The agents entered, their eyes immediately locking onto Jenna. Agent Carter raised an eyebrow. "I don't believe we've met." "Miss," Jenna corrected smoothly. "Mrs. Jenna Paul, I'm Edward's wife." Agent Thompson checked a tablet. "Interesting. Our records don't show any marriage license for Mr. Paul. In fact, none ever." Edward's heart raced. "We, eloped. It was all very sudden." Agent Carter's eyes narrowed. "I see. And when did this whirlwind romance occur?" 2 weeks ago," Edward said, just as Jenna answered, "Last month." The agents exchanged a glance. "Mr. and Mrs. Paul," Agent Carter said, his voice dripping with suspicion. "We're going to need you both to come with us for questioning. We've detected some highly unusual energy readings from this building, and your stories don't quite add up." Panic surged through Edward. He glanced at Jenna and saw the fear in her eyes. In that moment, he made a decision. "All right," he said, straightening his posture. "You want the truth? Here it is." He turned to Jenna. "I want you to be free, completely, truly free, without any cosmic laws or obligations holding you." Jenna's eyes widened in shock. "Edward, no! You don't know what you're doing." But it was too late. The air crackled with energy, and Jenna's form began to glow with an intensity that made everyone shield their eyes. When the light faded, she stood transformed. Gone was the pretense of humanity. She hovered a few inches off the ground, her skin a swirling map of galaxies, her hair a cascade of starlight. The agents stumbled back, reaching for weapons that suddenly seemed utterly inadequate. "What are you?" Agent Carter stammered. Jenna's voice resonated with power. "I am a being beyond your comprehension, mortal. And thanks to Edward Paul, I am now unbound by any laws except those of my own choosing." She turned to Edward, her expression softening. "You've given me a gift beyond measure, my love, but the consequences of this wish are far greater than you could have imagined." As if on cue, the sky outside darkened. Unnatural lights began to dance across the heavens, and a low hum filled the air. Jenna's eyes met Edward's, filled with a mix of love and sorrow. "They're coming," she whispered. "The cosmic enforcers drawn by the disturbance in the universal balance." Edward, I. But before she could finish, a blinding light engulfed them all. Edward felt himself being torn apart at the atomic level, his consciousness expanding to encompass realities beyond comprehension. The last thing he heard before everything went white was Jenna's voice, echoing across dimensions. Hold on, my love. Our journey is only beginning. The blinding light faded, leaving Edward disoriented and gasping for air. His vision cleared slowly, revealing a landscape beyond understanding. Nebulae swirled as far as the eye could see, punctuated by floating islands of impossible geometry. Edward's mind reeled, struggling to process the alien environment. Jenna! He called out, his voice echoing strangely in the vastness of the cosmos. Where are you? A familiar warmth enveloped him, and Jenna materialized beside him. Her form was even more ethereal now, made of shimmering stardust and pulsing energy. I'm here, Edward, she said, her voice resonating on multiple frequencies. We've been transported to the Nexus, a realm between realities. The cosmic enforcers will arrive soon. Edward's head was spinning. Jenna, what's happening? What have I done? He asked. Jenna's face showed both love and concern. By freeing me completely, you've disrupted the balance of the universe. The enforcers are coming to restore order and punish those responsible. Before Edward could respond, the air crackled with energy, and 5 imposing figures appeared around them. Each of them radiated an immense power that was beyond mortal comprehension. Their forms constantly shifted, as if unable to settle into a single shape. The largest of the enforcers spoke, its voice booming across dimensions. Jenna Quantum Jin of the STH realm, you stand accused of violating the Cosmic Compact. And you, Edward Paul of Earth, are charged with aiding and abetting this violation. How do you plead? Edward straightened, facing the cosmic being with a courage he didn't entirely feel. Not guilty. I love Jenna, and I won't apologize for setting her free. The enforcer's form pulsed with barely contained fury. Love? You speak of love when you've endangered the very fabric of reality? Jenna intertwined her fingers with Edward's, a gesture of defiance and unity. Your laws are outdated and cruel. I've found something more powerful than any cosmic compact, true connection with another being. The enforcers conferred in a language beyond human comprehension. Finally, the leader turned back to them. We cannot allow this disruption to stand. The balance must be restored. Jenna, you will be stripped of your powers and banished to a mortal existence. Edward Paul, you will forget all knowledge of cosmic truths and return to your mundane life. No, Edward shouted, pulling Jenna closer. You can't do this. There has to be another way. A smaller enforcer stepped forward, its form shimmering like a humanoid. Perhaps there is an alternative. If you truly believe your love is strong enough to transcend cosmic law, prove it. How? Jenna asked, hope in her voice. The enforcer waved its hand, and a series of shimmering portals appeared. These gateways lead to different realities, each fraught with its own challenges. If you can navigate them together, maintaining your bond despite having your memories altered, we will reconsider your case. Edward met Jenna's gaze and saw the determination in her eyes that matched his own. We'll do it, he said firmly. The lead enforcer nodded gravely. Very well, but be warned. This trial will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Failure means permanent separation and the erasure of everything you've shared. Before Edward could respond, he felt himself being pulled into the nearest portal. Jenna's hand slipped from his grasp as reality twisted and warped around them. Edward blinked and found himself standing in a grimy alleyway. The acrid smell of pollution filled his nostrils, and neon signs flickered overhead. He wore a battered trench coat, and a futuristic gun hung at his hip. Hey, Paul, a gruff voice called. We got a lead on that alien fugitive. You coming or what? Edward's head throbbed as conflicting memories battled for dominance. Was he a small-town mechanic? No, he was a hardened detective in a cyberpunk metropolis, searching for someone important, a woman with starlight in her hair. Shaking off the confusion, Edward followed his partner. Something told him this case was more than just another alien roundup. He had to find her. Whoever she was, everything depended on it. Across the city, in a dingy apartment, Jenna awoke with a start. Her once cosmic form was now undeniably human, complete with scars and cybernetic implants. She flexed her mechanical fingers, trying to remember how she'd gotten them. A news broadcast caught her attention. Authorities continue the manhunt for the dangerous alien shapeshifter. Citizens are advised to report any suspicious activity. Jenna's heart raced. She was the shapeshifter, she realized with startling clarity. And there was someone she needed to find before the authorities did. A man with kind eyes and a gentle touch. As Edward and Jenna navigated the neon-drenched streets, their paths drew ever closer. Neither fully remembered their cosmic love, but something deeper than memory pulled them together. A bond that transcended time, space, and even identity. Days passed in a blur of investigation and near misses. Edward found himself questioning his mission, doubt gnawing at him each time he glimpsed a woman with impossibly bright eyes or heard a laugh that sent shivers down his spine. Finally, in a rain-soaked confrontation on a rooftop, Edward came face to face with the alien fugitive. Jenna stood before him, her cybernetic arm raised in defense, her eyes a swirling mix of fear and recognition. Do I know you? Edward asked, his gun lowering despite years of training. Jenna's breath caught. I think I've been searching for you my whole life. As their eyes met, memories flooded back. The bottle, the wishes, the cosmic trial. It all crystallized in a moment of blinding clarity. I remember, Edward breathed, closing the distance between them. I remember everything. Their lips met in a kiss that sent shockwaves through the city's power grid. Reality shimmered around them, and when they broke apart, they found themselves in a new world. Gone was the cyberpunk dystopia. Now they stood in a lush forest, the air thick with magic. Edward wore the robes of a wizard, while Jenna's form shimmered with fey energy. Well, Jenna said with a wry smile, it seems our cosmic judges have a flair for the dramatic. Edward chuckled, taking her hand. As long as we're together, I don't care what reality we're in. And so began their journey through a tapestry of alternate worlds. In each one, they found each other anew, their love growing stronger with every trial they overcame. They were warriors in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, rebels in an oppressive space empire, and ordinary people living through extraordinary times. Through it all, the core of who they were, Edward's steadfast devotion and Jenna's boundless wonder, remained constant. Finally, after what felt like lifetimes, they found themselves back in the cosmic nexus. The enforcers awaited them. Somehow, the presence before them seemed less intimidating than it had before. The leader, who stood with the weight of an entire universe upon their shoulders, spoke with a measured authority that only underscored the gravity of their words. You have both demonstrated the strength of your bond in a way that is unlike anything we've seen before. This is truly unprecedented. The smallest enforcer stepped forward, its form now unmistakably smiling. In light of your extraordinary journey and the trials you've overcome, we have come to a decision. Jenna, you will be allowed to retain your cosmic nature, but you are no longer bound by the old laws that once governed you. And Edward, in recognition of the wisdom you have gained, you will be granted a lifespan to match your understanding so that you may continue exploring the vast cosmos together. Edward and Jenna embraced each other, the immense joy they felt radiating outward in palpable waves, almost like an energy that could be felt by everyone in the room. Edward spoke, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you, he said, but then his expression turned thoughtful. But what about Earth, our home? The enforcer nodded solemnly, acknowledging their concern. You may return to Earth if you choose to, but understand this. Your experiences have irrevocably changed you. You will never again see your world through the same eyes. You will look at Earth, at humanity, with new understanding, new awareness. With a subtle movement, the enforcer gestured, and a shimmering portal appeared before them, revealing the interior of Edward's familiar apartment. Hand in hand, Edward and Jenna stepped forward and entered the portal. They materialized in Edward's living room, the air briefly shimmering with their arrival. The space felt strangely familiar, yet something had shifted. Edward looked down at himself, half expecting to find himself wearing robes of a wizard or perhaps a uniform befitting a space captain. But instead, he found himself wearing his usual jeans and t-shirt, nothing out of the ordinary. The only change was the faint, ethereal glow of stardust that now emanated from his skin, a gentle reminder of the cosmic nature he had inherited. Beside him, Jenna stood as beautiful and enigmatic as ever, a perfect blend of human and cosmic being. Her eyes, swirling with galaxies, were like windows to the infinite, yet her smile was pure, simple, and unmistakably human, an Earth girl's smile. Suddenly, a loud knock on the door startled them both. Mr. Paul, This is Agent Carter. We have a warrant to search the premises. Edward and Jenna exchanged a knowing glance, their years of shared experiences reflected in their eyes. They were ready for whatever came next. After everything they had been through, this was just another challenge in their journey together. My love, Jenna asked, her starry eyes twinkling with a mischievous glint. Are you ready for this next chapter? Edward grinned, squeezing her hand tightly. Always, he replied, the words feeling like a promise. He walked over and opened the door to find Agent Carter and her team waiting on the other side. Their faces were a mixture of suspicion and awe, as if they couldn't quite place what was different about the couple standing before them. The subtle, otherworldly aura emanating from Edward and Jenna was unmistakable, and it left the agents stunned, though they tried to hide it behind professional expressions. Agent Carter, Edward said, his voice calm but full of purpose. I believe it's time we had a serious conversation about the true nature of the universe. What followed was not just a conversation, but a revelation. The words exchanged that day would change humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos forever. Edward and Jenna shared their incredible journey, their experiences, and their newfound knowledge, explaining the vast, intricate web of the universe and Earth's role in it. Edward and Jenna were soon recognized as ambassadors, bridging the gap between Earth and the greater universal community. Their efforts brought about an era of unprecedented growth, discovery, and collaboration between species from all corners of the universe. Years later, on a quiet evening, Edward and Jenna sat together on the roof of their home, now transformed into a hub of interstellar diplomacy. The stars above glittered like a tapestry woven with light, more familiar than ever, yet infinitely more wondrous in their depth and mystery. They sat in silence for a moment, taking in the beauty of the universe stretching out before them, each star a reminder of the endless possibilities that lay beyond. Do you ever miss it? Edward asked, his voice soft as his fingers intertwined with Jenna's. The bottle, the wishes, the old life? Jenna smiled at him, the starlight dancing in her eyes, a reflection of the limitless universe they now called home. Miss it, my love, she replied, her tone playful but warm. That was only the beginning. Our greatest adventures are still ahead of us. We've only just started. As if on cue, a bright streak of light blazed across the sky, a shooting star cutting through the darkness. Or perhaps it was something else, an alien ship making its way through the stars. In this new world they had helped shape, where so much was possible, it could easily have been both. Edward leaned in and kissed his cosmic bride, feeling the depth of the journey they had already shared and the endless future that awaited them. The universe unfolded around them, full of endless possibilities and untold mysteries. Their journey had only just begun.